the last 8 days, viewer, if you've been following the India-Canada flashpoint closely like I have, you may have noticed how a vast number of Western commentators, experts, journalists have busied themselves giving, in some cases, lectures to India. India should tread carefully. India should not escalate this. India should not raise this in the United Nations. India should not want to be on such a list. India should not get on the bad side of the Five Eye Alliance. India should not squander the goodwill of G20. India should not risk its new partnerships in the Anglosphere. India should not let this flare-up threaten its relationships in the West. India should be careful not to be equated with Russia and Saudi Arabia. India should not become a rogue state. India should handle this with care. India should do this, India should do that. For these experts and commentators, the entire onus of being responsible is on India. Sitting in their offices in Washington, D.C. or New York or wherever it is they live, most of these experts and gyanis have chosen the easy way out. Chalo, India ko lecture karte hain. After all, it's a third world country that's not sure of its footing on the international stage. India is, after all, still saddled with all its domestic issues. India is an ambitious rookie in world affairs, and India will have to just let all our collective gyan just wash over it. But there have been a few commentators, I have to say, who have stood out, risen above the puerility of the Western commentariat and think tank circuit to call the truth out like they see it. The truth that must be faced. The truth that Justin Trudeau should now be seen not only as perhaps one of Canada's most incompetent prime ministers, but one under whom Canada's international reputation, such as it is, has been irrevocably damaged. I don't have to go over what Trudeau has managed to achieve in just this last 1 week, viewer, because you saw that on my show just a couple of days ago. He has managed, however, to inflame India with his messy and still unsubstantiated claim on the killing of Hardeep Nijjar, the terrorist. He has angered Israel, Poland, Germany and France by hosting and honoring a Nazi in the Canadian House of Commons. He has rubbed Russia the wrong way by cozying up to Ukraine's President Zelensky, even though both leaders ended up becoming a global laughingstock as they gave that Nazi a standing ovation in the House of Commons a couple of days ago. He has reminded Sri Lanka of Canada's track record in providing a safe haven to LTTE members. His hubris has nudged Bangladesh into reminding the world that the assassin of their founder president has been protected by Canada for a quarter century, as I showed you on my show yesterday. He has irked his Five Eyes alliance partners, the US, UK and Australia, by putting them in an awkward position, by putting them in a spot and asking them to take a stand against India, which they haven't and refuse to. Perhaps above all, however, as a result of this global campaign of self-humiliation, Trudeau has infuriated his very own country, Canada, the most. And that's today. Let's forget about the India angle for a moment, because it has become glaringly obvious that Justin Trudeau's attack on India is only one small part of a much larger campaign to somehow rescue a political system and government that is seen in perhaps poorer light than any other Canadian government before it in the last 50 years. Once again, viewer, it's not me saying it, it's the Canadian media. Vast numbers of Canadians now see their Prime Minister as someone who has diminished and damaged Canada's international reputation beyond measure. In his 8th year thus far as the Canadian Prime Minister, many prominent Canadian commentators see Trudeau as someone who has presided over a geographically giant nation, now seen as an international lightweight. A country without consequence. A country no longer taken that seriously in UN peacekeeping, not even considered in obvious groupings like the Quad, despite Canada being a Pacific nation, completely ignored on forums like the G20, militarily a nothing burger, and for all practical purposes, a flavorless, impactless, unmemorable state. Canada was still okay being an unmemorable, unexciting country. But now Trudeau has reminded a hyper-connected world that Canada is also a protector of the world's terrorists and wanted criminals. His attack on India comes a year after Trudeau's party very cutely launched an Indo-Pacific strategy as an offset to China's rising power, as much of the West has done. As Lon Gunter, One of the few Canadian commentators speaking straight on this issue says the Indo in Indo-Pacific, someone should tell Mr. Trudeau, stands for India. And Trudeau has completely blown that, leaving Canada without a major strategic partnership in Asia. Let that sink in. At some level, you've got to admire Justin Trudeau. It's not easy to achieve all of this in just 8 days. Now, this diplomatic dispute between India and Canada has been escalating step by step for the last 8 days, though for the last couple of days, things have cooled down somewhat, at least on the Canadian side. We haven't heard Justin Trudeau speak about the India issue for the last 3 days and counting. However, India's Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who's in the United States for the UN General Assembly, also held a public event where he addressed questions. Take a look at how, in signature style, he once again put Canada and Justin Trudeau on notice. This is one of India's most soft-spoken, most erudite ministers. But listen carefully to how Dr. S. Jaishankar lays it on the line, sets the agenda for Canada.
India has firmly asserted its stance on the global stage.
That rule makers do not subjugate rule takers. After all, rules will work only when they apply equally to all.
In the midst of an escalating diplomatic dispute with Canada, India has forthrightly expressed its views at the United Nations. Selective actions in the name of preserving territorial integrity and internal affairs not acceptable.
Nor must we countenance that political convenience determines responses to terrorism, extremism, and violence. Similarly, respect for territorial integrity and non-interference in internal affairs cannot be exercises in cherry-picking. When reality departs from the rhetoric, we must have the courage to call it out.
Canada has pointed fingers at India over the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, designated as terrorist by India.
We cannot bend the rules of state-to-state relations for political expediency, because we've seen and continue to see the extent to which democracies are under threat through various means of foreign interference.
India has made it abundantly clear that it rejects any form of diplomatic dominance in shaping international rules.
For all the talk, it is still a few nations who shape the agenda and seek to define the norms. This cannot go on indefinitely, nor will it go unchallenged. A fair, equitable, and democratic order will surely emerge once we all put our minds to it. And for a start, that means ensuring that rule makers do not subjugate rule takers. After all, rules will work only when they apply equally to all.
Canada is providing a safe haven for some of India's most wanted individuals. This includes gangsters and terrorists. During his visit to New York, the External Affairs Minister emphasized once more how India's extradition requests remain unaddressed by Canadian authorities.
You also have to appreciate, Ken, that in the last few years, Canada actually has seen a lot of organized crime, relating to, the secessionist forces, organized crime, violence, extremism. They're all very, very deeply mixed up. So, in fact, we have been, talking about specifics and information. We have actually been badgering the Canadians. We've given them a lot of information about organized crime leadership, which operates out of Canada. There are a large number of extradition requests. There are terrorist leaders who have been identified.
However, India, while rejecting Canadian allegations, remains open to examining the Nijjar case if Canada can provide substantial evidence.
One, we told the Canadians that this is not the government of India's policy. Two, we told the Canadians saying that, look, if you have something specific, if you have something relevant, let us know. We are open to looking at it. So, but to understand the context of it, in a way, because the picture is not complete without the context in a way.
India rejects any attempts at diplomatic manipulations while remaining open to dialogue and cooperation. Bureau Report, India Today.
Namaste from Bharat.
Italian journalist Francesca Morino, who has written extensively about Canada, about world leaders on the world stage, and who's been on social media very, very prominently with many of her tweets doing the rounds on the international circuit, joins me live. Francesca, always good to have you here on India Today. Thanks for being with me. My first question to you, your assessment, of these allegations that now mark 8 days of an escalating diplomatic standoff between India and Canada. No evidence has been provided so far, but this diplomatic showdown continues, Francesca.
My assessment was since the beginning about double standards. First of all, there's a first part. You don't accuse a friendly state and ally to have committed an extrajudicial murder if you don't have proofs. When Turkey accused Saudi Arabia, they showed proofs immediately. I mean, this is the way you do it if you want to. You don't rely on credible information or possible links. This is, not even in play school you do this.
I agree.
I mean, the least you can say is irritual. There must be a reason why he did it and why he did it now. The other thing is double standards. It was my first thought. It was the first thought of many people I know. When Karima Baluch was killed in Toronto, Canada, on Canadian soil, he said nothing. Nothing, not a word.
Yeah, not a word.
The Canadian government refused to comment on the death of an activist, not a terrorist, not somebody with red notices of Interpol who never heard, but somebody who was actually been put by BBC on the list of the 100 most influential and inspiring women.
Absolutely.
In 2016. Somebody who had been receiving threats to her life for the longest time in Pakistan and in Canada. The Canadian government had nothing to say, nothing, not a word. And the investigation has been closed within 2 days. And since the beginning, even though she was in Canada as a political refugee, even then, the death of Karima was investigated immediately as a non-criminal case. Double standards, why?
Why do you think this kind of hypocrisy exists, Francesca? Why do you believe Canadian authorities give a free pass to Khalistanis, grant them citizenship, take no action against them? When a democracy, a country of law and order with structures, with a judiciary, with a system in place, has proscribed these people as terrorists, and yet they are protected by Canada. Why do you think this happens?
See, I think there is a political reason. Of course, everybody knows the most. The only reason why Trudeau is kept there in the government is his alliance with a party led by a Khalistani sympathizer. So
Gurpatwant Singh,
it's,
yes.
it's a matter of survival for him. Regarding Khalistanis, we have them in Italy yesterday, 2 days ago in Italy. There's been a huge fight in Pordenone, in a village near Pordenone, between Khalistanis, between Sikhs actually, for the control of the local Gurupara. Huge fight. A group was chasing the other group with swords. The local journalists have interviewed members of the local Sikh community, which are totally scared, and they are saying that they would leave the area because these groups are trying to take control. And these groups are the same groups holding the so-called referendum for free Khalistan, for free Punjab.
In Canada as well, yeah.
Even in Italy. They did it in Rome time ago. I mean, after UK, in Europe, in Italy, we have the biggest Sikh community. So they are doing it even here.
No, it's interesting, Francesca, that you brought up what happened in that village in Italy, you know, the control of a Gurdwara, you know, Khalistanis fighting with the Sikhs there. Is an opportunity for all of us to remind everyone watching that Khalistanis have nothing to do with Sikhs. Sikhs have no place for the Khalistan issue. They don't need certificates from anyone. The Khalistanis are a tiny, minuscule number of people from a very proud and vast community that is spread all across the world from here in India. So the Sikhs, the Punjabis, require no certificates from anyone. Their pride, their loyalty does not need a certificate from any one of us, and most certainly not from Khalistanis who are looking to manipulate their origins in the Sikh religion to try and fan up sentiments of people of Punjab. It will never work, because we've been reporting from Punjab, Francesca, and I'm sure you've been seeing our reports, and the people of Punjab have absolutely zero truck with the Khalistan issue. It has no resonance, and it never will. It's only being fanned by Pakistan. Now, Francesca, you spoke about Italy, you spoke about Europe. The logical next question that I would ask is, should Europe, Italy, for example, be cautious now? Because the global spotlight has been shifted onto Khalistanis for a moment now. There will possibly be a push for asylum in countries like yours.
See, of course, the Trudeau stand will serve as a ground for Khalistanis to claim they are persecuted by India. What always makes me wonder is that, you know, we had that famous book in Italy, that Christ stopped the Ineboli, written by somebody taken into the Jews, into the Nazist camps. What always puzzles me is that Khalistan stops at Wagah. In sense, these guys are just claiming Punjab, the Indian Punjab.
Yeah.
But nobody always highlights this here, or even in US, Canada. It is not a fight for Punjab. Punjab in the West, many don't know, but it is half Indian, half Pakistani. They
We're going to continue to, Francesca, I appreciate you joining me, and especially for giving us that perspective from Italy, where Khalistanis apparently have been indulging in violence there as well. We'll keep a close track on it, because there is, as Francesca just showed us, a Europe element and angle to this unfolding international story between India and Canada. Francesca, appreciate it. Thank you very much for being with me. Let me take our viewers now through the latest top 5 developments in this unfolding story, because something's happening literally every minute on this. Now, India has accused Canada of providing safe haven to Khalistani terrorists. India today has accessed a big national investigation agency dossier now, which reveals that Khalistani organization, the Babbar Khalsa International, a terrorist group responsible for plane hijackings and bombings, has links with India's most wanted terrorist Dawood Ibrahim, sitting in Pakistan's Karachi. Meanwhile, the National Investigation Agency in India has intensified its crackdown on Khalistani terrorist gangster nexus in synchronized raids across 53 locations in 7 states. The NIA has detained over a dozen Khalistani suspects while also seizing arms and ammunition. Canadian Khalistani terrorist Arshdeep Dalla has now fallen under the anti-terror agency's radar. The NIA has detained gangster-turned-terrorist Arsh Dalla's aide Sundar alias Jora from Punjab's Firozpur. Expect many more such arrests to take place in the days ahead. Remember, the Khalistan gangster nexus is a big one, with many of the principal players sitting in Canada. Amid suspicion over the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the terrorist in British Columbia, Canada, sources tell India today that the ISI of Pakistan is suspected to have hired criminals to kill Nijjar in Canada's survey as part of a punitive strike related to gang violence in Canada. The ISI wanted to control the drug business and was allegedly pressuring Nijjar to fully cooperate with gangsters who had come to Canada in the last 2 years. Expect many more news breaks on that front in the hours and the days ahead. The big ISI gangster nexus. Meanwhile, raising strong objection to Khalistani cartoon terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun's hate speeches against India, the Hindu Forum in Canada has sought a ban on this cartoon character's entry into Canadian territory. The Canada-based Hindu group has alleged that Pannun is spreading fear among Hindus and Indians living in Canada. This coward, of course, lives in New York City. The big questions, viewer, that all of you are asking, and these are questions that I'm asking as well, we're going to put them to a very well-known observer and commentator who's been looking at this issue very, very closely for the last 8 days. But first, I want to read out those questions. Number one, relations appear on the surface to be worsening between India and Canada. But what is next? Things are escalating, but what is that next step? There's suspense. Question number one. Question number two, is the India-Canada back channel working? Are there diplomats, off camera, beyond social media and press conferences? Are they talking to each other, trying to cool things down and normalize relations? Number three, does India gain or lose from this flashpoint? There are many different perspectives on this because there are many different angles, but it's a simple question to ask. Are we gaining or are we losing in the wake of what's happening between India and Canada? Number four, has India's posture in some ways surprised the West? India's aggressive posture, cancelling visas, the things that Dr. Jaishankar said today in New York City, has it taken the West by surprise? And number five, will this affect India's relations with others, including countries like the United States, the UK, Australia, and other close diplomatic partners of the country? Because these are countries that also have, remember, close ties with Canada. Joining me live now is Abijit Mitra. He's one of India's most well-regarded observers and commentators on international affairs, and certainly one of my favorites. He's also senior research fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. He's been looking very, very closely at every little thing that's been emerging from this India-Canada fracas. Abijit, welcome. It's day 8 since Prime Minister Trudeau made these allegations, and we've been seeing how this story has taken many, many different twists and turns. The latest, of course, has been Dr. Jaishankar. I just read out those 5 questions. I'm going to ask you those questions, Abijit, one by one, and I want your perspective on them. Number one, Abijit, relations appear to be worsening between the two countries. If you look at what the External Affairs Minister said in New York today, it didn't seem like things are cooling down. But the real question is, what next? How would you answer that, Abijit?
Look, Shiv, unfortunately, this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Because you have sources in government, I have sources in government. I don't know what your sources are telling you, but mine are just not ready to back it down. If anything, they are going to go after more properties. And I think today itself, there's been a raid, an NIA raid against about 50 Punjab-based organized criminals. This is going to get a lot worse. The first list of 19 OCI cancellations was just the beginning. This is going to slowly. They don't want a single innocent person to suffer, but they are tracing every single video of protests, etc., to go higher up and higher up and higher up. Second, remember, Arindam Bagchi in his press conference had demanded parity of staff. You haven't seen anything happen out here. We're waiting for something big to come out from the Canadian side to enact that parity. Because if Canada refuses to withdraw staff, we will force that parity on them. The third thing, which I know for a fact that is being discussed, is the shutting down of the Chandigarh consulate. Now, remember, we have one High Commission and 2 embassies out there. They have one High Commission and 3 consulates out.
Consulates,
here. That is not parity. That is 1 plus 2 equals 1 plus 3 doesn't work. And Chandigarh, if we shut it down, it will be fabulously popular with Canadian diplomats who view it as a punishment posting. They don't want to go to Chandigarh. So, it's kind of win-win. But there's lots more steps. I'm not going to get into the details, but there's so much more that's being considered. I have never seen a government this resolute. I think the last time I saw this was when the entire Devyani Khobragade incident happened.
Very, very interesting. Second question. Okay, so you're saying there are many more things that you're not mentioning. We won't go into those, but it just shows that there is not only resolution, but there's also a plan, a calibrated plan on how to take things depending on how Canada responds. Question number 2, Abijit. Is the India-Canada back channel working? We can't see the back channel, but obviously, both the countries have relations, they have diplomatic machineries. Is there a back channel at work to cool things down?
Unfortunately not. And this is the problem. You see, the whole issue has been that Canada's bureaucracy, in America, you generally find Pentagon is more Republican-leaning and state is more Democrat-leaning.
Right.
In Canada, the bureaucracy is institutionally left. They are institutionally pro-liberal, pro the Liberal Party and pro-Trudeau. And so what's happening is there's this sort of ideological bias and condescension coming into every single non-ministerial, non-political meeting from what I'm hearing. It's getting worse. There is no real conversation happening at any level. Technically, intelligence agencies talk to each other even when things are very bad. Even that is not happening. And the main reason for it is this sort of idée fixe. They want us to act, but they refuse to give us intelligence on what. I mean, if I say Shivarur, I'm going to condemn you for not acting on my concerns. You'll keep asking me for the rest of the program, what are your concerns? But I'm not telling you my concerns. What are you meant to do? I mean,
very true.
How am I meant to act on this?
And it's been 8 days and not a single thing has been shared. Dr. Jaishankar also re-upped that point. Yeah.
And note, again, what they keep leaking out is, the intel exists. It's really damning. And, all these Western security experts just go completely gaga over it. But nobody is actually talking about the intel. I wonder if you saw the Globe and Mail's piece, the interview with Jagmeet Singh today. Yeah. He says, I saw the intel. It's very credible. And then he says, I didn't see anything specific.
Yeah, no, it's hilarious.
I mean, how do you reconcile the two?
I hear you, and that's the reason. That's actually the reason I began my show, by quoting some of these amazing experts. Which brings me to my third question, Abijit, because the conversation is happening in public. It's a hyper-connected world where this very visceral sort of exchange is happening between India and Canada. The question I want to ask you is, because you also look at sentiment, you also look at optics and perception. Does India gain or lose from this fracas with Canada? Simple question.
There's literally no downside to this shift. I've worked out all the angles. I'm human, so I'm fallible.
I knew you would.
Sure, some of the audience can find an angle. But look, as I see it, had India backed down, this would have literally been a green light to communities like the Sikh community in Italy that Francesca spoke about, the Sikh community and let's not call it the Sikh community, let's call it Khalistanis, because 99% of the Sikhs in both UK, Italy, and Canada are all hostages to these extremist fringe elements who threaten them every single day. And, a culturally sensitive multicultural police just throws them to the wolves, claiming cultural relativity. So what's been happening is it would have encouraged these organized crime networks to spread their tentacles, consolidate their control over the community and things like that, number one. Number two, it has finally brought, again, in an internet age, when Kanishka happened, it wasn't the internet age. In an internet age, it has again raised the specter of what organized crime, terrorism, etc. can do in Canada. Number three, if you notice, the murder of Sukhdev Singh, which happened 2-3 days after this entire thing blew up, nobody wants to talk about it. Why is that?
True.
Why is that? I mean, I never understand this, because do we know that it's a clearly gangland killing? I think we should do a lot more to keep highlighting that. Number four, what's happening is all the rats are coming out of the wood. You've seen people like Tim Uppal in the Conservative Party, who calls Nijar Bhai, Nijar, etc., refusing to even mention that this man is a wanted terrorist or a criminal or anything of that sort. So, it's very good that these people are exposing themselves, because then it makes our OCI and visa denial program much more robust.
And hopefully those actions are coming soon. I'm going to club my last two questions for you, Abijit, and you can work that in. Which is, has India's posture, this resoluteness that you were talking about, has it surprised the West? And will this affect India's relations, with countries like the United States and the UK?
The US and UK, absolutely not. If the US and UK don't want to touch this with a barge pole. Rishi Sunak's spokesperson was asked, he replied saying, the talks for a trade deal are on. I mean, how do you connect the two together? But he clearly didn't want to talk about it. Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan have said certain things, but notice they have refused to condemn India. It is the condemnation that matters. This is like saying, it's very serious. For example, if your dog, decides to threaten me and bite me, or threaten to bite me, really, I come to you and say, Shiv, you should take this very seriously. And what you say is, Abijit, I take your concerns very seriously. And then you go talk to your dog, Fluffy, and say, Fluffy, you're a very bad boy. I expect better behavior from you. Is that a condemnation, really? Our relations with the US are going nowhere. I think in the general scheme of things, India is much more important than Canada. I think the problem with Canada has been, they still think they're at Pierre Trudeau's time, where we were going around with a beggar bowl and they were a big, strong, powerful country giving us atoms for peace nuclear reactors. And today they are nobody.
The realization of a changed India, without all the sentimentalism attached to it, has been perhaps one of the biggest learnings from the last 8 days. And I think it's something that is still dawning on all these experts that we're talking about. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking about it a lot more, but that's all the time we have for on this particular segment. Abijit, I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to me and taking my questions here on 5 Live. Look forward to having you back again very, very soon. That was Abijit Mitra.